In a recent video that I did on the channel, I talked about Wii U and 3DS games that you should buy before Nintendo closes the eShop next year. And in that video, I talked about certain Wii U games that should definitely be ported to the Nintendo Switch, or it would be nice if those games came over, like Xenoblade Chronicles X, for example. Now in this video, I wanted to kind of play off of that and talking about a previous gen system to where some games are kind of locked on that system, and it would be nice if Nintendo brought those games over to the Nintendo Switch. Now what I have here is I have a stack. So this will be volume 1 of Nintendo Wii games that I think Nintendo should bring to the Nintendo Switch. Whether those are remasters, remakes, if it's a shop that you can buy them from. I think that there's so many cool Wii games that were somewhat, I would say, affected by motion controls that could have new life and even be better on the Nintendo Switch. So in this video, we're gonna break down 10 games that should come to the Nintendo Switch. Now, starting off with number 1, and this is in no particular order, and that is Mad World from Sega and Platinum Games. You guys might know them from the Bayonetta series, and I think that Mad World would be a great game to bring to Nintendo Switch. You bring it over 1080p, 60 frames per second. The game is short, but you could expand upon maybe the local co-op that's in the game to put in some more replay value, maybe add in another difficulty. But this was a really fun game back on the Wii. It was kind of like Sin City, the movie, but it was like video game form. It was super violent, very gritty, great voice acting, really good music. I really loved my time with Mad World on the Wii, and one of the more mature titles to hit the system early in the Wii's life, or somewhere early. It was already a couple years in, but you guys know what I'm talking about when it comes to these type of mature games. So yes, Mad World would be a great pick to bring over to the Nintendo Switch, and also the, I would say, affinity that Nintendo fans have with Platinum Games titles would be a good reason to bring this over. The next game here, and of course a lot of you guys probably already want this, is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Now this is a GameCube game and it's a Wii game, and it's already been ported to the Wii U. So yes, I would like The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess from the Wii U to get ported, but I would like them to keep a few things from the previous gen version, or the previous gen version, or whatever the heck you want to talk about it when it comes down to it, because some of the controls in the Wii U game were definitely jacked up, especially like the horse controls. So if they can keep some of the stuff that they had in this version of the game, but then also make it a bit nicer, that would be nice. And then also, even if you could take like the GameCube version of the game, that would even be like the most optimal right there. The GameCube version of the game, remaster that and make it nice, but I doubt they'll do that since it's already remastered and good for the most part on the Wii U. But just The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Like, I just grabbed one of the copies here. This was the Wii copy because we're talking about Wii games. But yes, the GameCube version, whatever, the Wii U version, put Twilight Princess on the Nintendo Switch. I think it's coming though. I think it's coming. I think that we're going to get this game on the Nintendo Switch, and it's going to be awesome because Twilight Princess is awesome. One of my favorite Legend of Zelda games, especially with The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask coming out this week as of the time that I'm recording this video on the Nintendo Switch Online, the expansion pack. So that's going to be pretty cool. Next up, we're going to discuss a game that recently got an announcement on the Nintendo Switch and is launching this April, but it's missing a few games that I would like to see, and that would be the Wii Sports Resort game. Wii Sports Resort, but you bring it over to Nintendo Switch, but they don't have to make a whole brand new game. What they could do with Wii Sports Resort is just take the games and add it as DLC. We already know that there's going to be a DLC game with golf being added in at a later date from the April release. So I think they can take a lot of these games here because this has 12 games. It has jet skiing, it has bike riding, it has frisbee throwing, it has plane flying, it has all these cool sports in here. Wii Sports Resort is way better than the original Wii Sports, and I think that this game has so much stuff in here. It would be great if they brought it over. This is such a great sequel, such an iconic game. So if they're able to bring over more of those sports, port those over, or bring them over from what they did on the Wii here, that would be a very good thing for the Nintendo Switch sports game that is coming out very soon here. Next up is another Atlas game that I really want to see on the Nintendo Switch. It came out on the Vita and there's no Switch version yet, and that is Muramasa, the Demon Blade from the Wii. It was originally a Wii game, then it was ported to the Vita, and pretty much it's went silent from there. This is one of those vanillaware games. You guys know 13 Sentinels, you know Odin Sphere. Yeah, this is one of their games that they made exclusively for the Wii back in the day, and it features 2 different characters that you can use and hours upon hours of gameplay between the two, and it's essentially a 2D side-scrolling action game. It's a ton of fun, it has smooth controls, it has good gameplay, and it would be a great candidate to come over to the Nintendo Switch when it comes to a port and everything. So I'm hoping one of these days we can play Muramasa the Demon Blade on modern hardware. You know how Atlas and Vanillaware are, man. It takes them a while to get things done. So I'm hoping one of these days Muramasa does come over. Next up is another action game that came out, of course, exclusively for the Wii when it was released, and that is Red Steel 2. This is from Ubisoft. This was a game, actually the first third-party game to use the Nintendo Switch Wii Motion Plus accessory for higher, more accurate motion tracking and motion controls, and it was a lot of fun. This game had a ton of style, ran extremely smooth on like a modified Unreal Engine 3 or 2.5 or something like that. It was a modified Unreal Engine game from Ubisoft. They spent a lot of time and effort on this game. These people actually went on to make For Honor, the people who made this game, so there's swordplay expertise, and this is such a cool game. You got this guy that's essentially a hybrid. He's between a swordman and a gunslinger, and you're out there in like a Wild West setting. You're slashing people up into the air like Devil May Cry, but then you're shooting them. It's first person, which is still first person, but at the same time, it was so much fun to play. I think that Red Steel 2 is a great candidate to come back in some way, shape, or form. The only reason why we got a Red Steel 2 was because the first game was like a launch title and people were hyped up for it, but it ended up being not so good. So they made a second one, and this game is so much better, but people were burnt from the first game, so they didn't buy this one. So Ubisoft should bring back Red Steel on the Nintendo Switch, but just Red Steel 2. We don't need the first game. Just bring back the second game. All right, and moving on to the next game here. This is a game that I know a lot of you guys are going to want to play on the Nintendo Switch, and that is Punch-Out! We haven't had a new Punch-Out since the Wii. There's been nothing on the Wii U. There's been nothing on the Nintendo Switch. There's been nothing on the Nintendo 3DS. Punch-Out is a forgotten series at this point, and then we just learned that Next Level Games is the one making Mario Strikers Battle League. So that leaves nobody at this point working on Punch-Out, but this is such a fun game. It's a boxing puzzle game where you have to remember different patterns from the enemies and basically find the most efficient, fastest way to knock these people out. And they remix a bunch of the previous fighters and they have new fighters in there. It's a ton of fun. It's extremely challenging. There's a lot of different variation. There's even co-op play in the game, so making that online would be a lot of fun as well. And plus there's Donkey Kong in the game. You can fight against Donkey Kong in the ring. So yes, I would love for them to bring back Punch-Out in some way, shape, or form. It deserves another chance. Although I do admit that it would be hard because of some of the stereotypes in the game. I think Nintendo would want to kind of like navigate those in a certain type of way, because I guess you could do that back in the day, you know, on the NES and all that. But in today's day, it might be hard to do something like that when it comes down to what people think or what people say. I'm not sure if Nintendo wants that type of smoke on their games and all that, but we'll see. I think that it's still in good taste for the most part. I think that it's still in all good fun. I don't think anything's super offensive when it comes to any of the different themes in there. Although I can't speak for everybody, but that's just my opinion. But I really hope that Punch-Out comes back in some way, shape, or form with a brand new game. I think that it would do extremely well in today's day if they're able to modify it and kind of make it a really cool type of boxing game and fun. Not realistic, but still just really cool and modern, great graphics and stuff like that, great art style. I think that Punch-Out could still have a life out there, but right now it's dead at this point. It's definitely one of those old franchises that Nintendo is not bringing back, but maybe it comes back one of these days from Next Level, or somebody else takes up the mantle for Punch-Out. Next up is a whole franchise that I would love to see on the Nintendo Switch, especially with Metroid Prime 4 looking like it might be revealed this year, and we might see some of this, but Metroid Prime, the series. This is Metroid Prime 3. This is my favorite one out of all of them, but I would love to see Metroid Prime 1, Metroid Prime 2, and Metroid Prime 3 all come to the Nintendo Switch at some point, which it does seem like it is going to happen, at least with Metroid Prime 1, like a big remaster, but you gotta bring the rest over, or something needs to happen with them, because these are such great games. Metroid Prime 3, you can still boot up that game on your Nintendo Wii, play it and be like, wow, this game looks great, this game plays great. I love the shooting controls with the Wii Motion Plus, or just like with the Wii Motion. You don't even need the Wii Motion Plus because it uses the IR. The enemies in this game, the boss fights in this game, the hypermeter in this game, there's just so much good stuff. And I'm not even a first-person shooter slash first-person action adventure fan. I don't like games like Mirror's Edge. I'm not the biggest fan of first-person camera viewpoints for games, but this game hits on those cylinders because of that motion sensing ability, because of the visceral type of shooting that you can do, being Samus kind of like through her vision. It's a lot of fun. Now, it does cut back on some of the other stuff that she can do, like in Metroid Dread, for example, the platforming, the jumping, all the different action, how fast she moves. You can't do that because you're going to get motion sickness. It's just going to be weird. You're running around in first person that fast. So they can't do that, but they can still make a very good game out of this. But they still made it an extremely good game. They got somebody like me who doesn't like first person to play through all the different games and beat them. So I'm really hoping that the Metroid Prime series, and of course Metroid Prime 3, does come at some point. Now, sticking with the Metroid theme, and I doubt Nintendo's ever going to do this, but Metroid Other M. We've got to talk about this. I know there's a lot of controversy surrounding this game in terms of how Samus speaks, how she acts, the story in there, what's going on with Ridley, and all the different things. Like, it's been talked about to here and back. I know, I get it, I understand. But from a pure gameplay standpoint, this game is gold. The only issue, well, more like the biggest issue with the gameplay is the controls. The controls of where you have to use a tiny little Wii D-pad in order to move around in the 3D environments. And then you have to move the controller from like the Wii remote sideways to move it to where you're holding it normal, like a TV remote, to shoot in the first person mode and all of that. And like some of the sections where you have to like force to walk in certain areas, like there's some really weird or baffling design choices when it comes to the gameplay and the controls. However, the boss fights, the action, the speed, the combos, everything else in this game is so good. And even for a Nintendo Wii game, it looks fantastic. This game will look incredible on the Nintendo Switch. Not quite as good as Dread, unless they completely remastered it and added all sorts of new graphical effects and everything. But overall, the game still looks good. You can still pop it in and play and have fun if you can get past the wonky controls and some of the depiction of Samus in this game. But either way, I don't have a problem with it. I just have a problem with the controls. That's my biggest issue. Not how Samus acts and stuff, is just the controls. So I'm hoping one of these days, Metroid Other M comes back in some way, shape, or form, but I doubt it. I think Nintendo wants to distance themselves from Metroid Other M, but it'd still be cool if it did come back. All right, I'm moving into the second to last game here, guys, and this is an RPG that definitely deserves to be on the Nintendo Switch, and that is The Last Story. This is from Hironobu Sakaguchi himself, the man who created Final Fantasy, the man behind it all. He did this game as an exclusive on the Nintendo Wii back in the day, and it's absolutely incredible. It had 3 versus 3 multiplayer or something like that, 6-player multiplayer. It had a great cast of really cool characters, had a big story, and a very unique battle system that combined cover system, combined shooting in the third person, and action melee combat. It has everything. The only problem is that the game was bursting at the seams because it really couldn't run that great on the Nintendo Wii. There was definitely issues there, but I still had a ton of fun with this game, and I still think that it's really good, and it's just on the Wii. It's just stuck on the Wii and all of its rich gameplay, man. But this game would look so good and would play so good if it was brought over to a more modern system with everything. So I'm hoping one of these days we can get a Last Story. Now, Mistwalker, they just released their Fantasia on like the Apple stuff, and you can see how good that game is, the quality and the visuals and what they did there. They're still a good studio. He's still a good producer. And I just feel that, man, I wish Nintendo would kind of reach out and say, hey, look, we want The Last Story on the Nintendo Switch. Let's get a budget together. Let's get it there, because I think this game would sell. It's not like I'm just saying, oh yeah, I want this game because I'm a huge RPG nerd, which I am, but this game would actually sell because the original was one of, I think at the time, it was like their best selling. I think XC did like the localization and the ports and all that type of stuff for this. Nintendo didn't do it here in the West. And like they said that this game sold like 500,000 units or something like that for the Wii at that time, which was really good for a core RPG. So if you release this with better graphics, good controls, and running smoothly on the Switch, I could see this being a million seller considering the pedigree of the game and the developers and everything like that. So I really wish, I hope, I think one of these days we will have Sakaguchi's masterpiece of the last story on the Nintendo Switch. Last but definitely not least is a game that I know a lot of you guys will love that I put in here. It is a treasure classic, and that is Sin and Punishment: Star's Successor. And out of all of these games that I talked about here, yes, we have some big hitters like Wii Sports Resort, like Metroid Prime 3, like The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. We have games that are the 90+ average when it comes to review scores. I think that Sin and Punishment: Star's Successor might be the best one, because this game kind of just really put together everything about the Wii with the controls and the gameplay, stylized, had a lot of action in there. There was so many things about this game. Sin and Punishment: Star's Successor is such an awesome game that people just haven't played. Yes, it is an on-rails kind of, shooter and everything like that. Think like a mixture of like Star Fox and also Jet Force Gemini, games like that. It just has like a mix of all these different types of games. And Sin and Punishment is a franchise that's been around. There's the N64 game, but Star's Successor didn't sell as well as I think Nintendo and Treasure wanted. But at the same time, man, it's still such a great game with smooth controls, good frame rate, good everything. It just needs another modern touch to it and bring it over to Nintendo Switch. So, man, this would be the game that would get me super hyped. If they said, hey, Sin and Punishment: Star's Successor is coming to Nintendo Switch, that might get me more hyped than anything else, considering how unique this game is and how fun it is, and like the replay value, like the arcade. It just brings me back to the day, it brings me back in time when games were simple but then had that depth with it. It had all these different little mechanics that you could exploit to get that next score or whatever it was, man. So Sin and Punishment: Star's Successor needs to success its way to the Nintendo Switch. But these are my games. Now, there's a lot more Wii games that I didn't talk about, and I did that on purpose because I might have another volume 2 of this, but I also wanted to hear your Wii games that should be on the Nintendo Switch. What are the big games that weren't in this video? What do you feel should come over at some point in some way, shape, or form? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and we will see you for the next video. Peace.